Numbers, numbers, numbers. How much can you carry? How much gas do you need? How far can you fly? How much runway do you need? What's the crosswind component? Where's the center of gravity? We all need to know these numbers before we go flying in the SF-50. Cirrus provides tables for determining them, but there is an alternative to wading through the airplane flight manual doing lots of interpolation by hand. It's an iOS app called VisionProFlight, written by SF-50 owner and pilot Bob Urchel. Welcome to another real-world SF-50 flying video. This one is titled the VisionProFlight app. Hello, I'm David Weeks. I've been flying professionally for over 50 years, starting as a CFI, then as a charter pilot in light twins. I spent time as an air ambulance pilot in a Swearingen Metro, and I worked as a demonstration pilot for the Learjet factory. I had a 35-year airline career flying the 737-200 and 300, the A320 series, and I retired as a Boeing 787 captain. I'm also a current CFII. I've got over 650 hours in the SF-50, and I'd like to share my SF-50 experiences with you. Now, there may be other YouTube channels that have glitzier production values than this one. I like to spend my time writing and teaching about the SF-50 and not doing post-production work. So just imagine this video is like a hangar chat session between friends. First, I do want to state clearly that the procedures in the Cirrus VisionJet airplane flight manual are always controlling. This video is not flight instruction. The SF-50 airplane flight manual has many pages of performance charts so you can determine many critical performance numbers. But as we all know, much of the time you need to sharpen your pencil and spend time interpolating between table entries to get an accurate number from the charts. That introduces the chance for error. If you choose not to interpolate, you won't be determining the optimum performance for the aircraft. Now let's take some time to do a walkthrough of VisionProFlight. It's got so many great features and capabilities that I don't have time to demo them all, but I do want to do more than just scratch the surface. I'm running VisionProFlight on my MacBook Pro, but the app works the same on the iPhone and iPad. A new user needs to do is to set up VisionProFlight for your airplane. On the home screen, under Profiles, is Airplane. Click Airplane to create a new aircraft profile. Here's mine, but if we want to create a new one, click the plus sign. This is where you get to add a description, your tail number, the basic empty weight, and the arm, and you can obtain that information from your personal airplane flight manual. Select the model of SF-50 you have, a G1, G2, or a G2 Plus, and here's where you configure the default seating arrangement. Note that you can choose family or executive seating, and in the graphic, notice how the width of the seat changes. The executive seats are just a little bit wider and they weigh half a pound more. If you're not sure what you have, you can consult your AFM, or you can even look on the seat as there's a tiny little sticker indicating the weight of the seat. Also, this is where you can indicate if you have seat 4 installed or seats 6 and 7 and whether the console is installed. Once you have those bits of information in there, hit save. We're going to hit cancel. After that, you can hit people and bags. If you carry the same people regularly, you can create a profile for them that saves you from having to re-enter that data all the same time. First and last name, any notes, and the weight of the passenger in question. Next, go to Settings. This is where you can enter the desired units for weight, fuel volume, and runway length. Metric system users will really appreciate this page. Now, if you need to use an airport that is not in the very comprehensive airport database that Bob uses, you can create your own user airport. I did this before flying to Alamos, Sonora, Mexico, and to El Fuerte, Sinaloa, Mexico. Click the plus, and then you can enter the relevant information to define the airport in question. Now that you've got your airplane profile created, you are ready to get to work. First, decide if you want to create a mission or just create a flight. But what's the difference between a mission and a flight? A mission is the full data for a given flight, but it's saved, so you can easily recall it without having to re-enter all the data again. A flight is all the data for the flight, but it's not saved for easy recall. But not to worry, you can create a mission from a flight if you wish. Let's start by creating a flight from Flagstaff, Arizona to Wichita, Kansas. Click the flight button. I always start on the weather and fuel page. Enter the departure and arrival airports. VisionProFlight remembers the last airport pair used, but we're going to enter from scratch. So I'll click and I will enter KFLG, hit return and save. And the arrival airport is going to be Wichita, which is KICT. Hit return and save. VisionProFlight pulls up the straight line great circle distance between the two airports and display this. Now you can edit this as needed if you know your routing will be longer. The straight line great circle distance between Flag and Wichita is 705 miles, but I usually have to fly about 20 miles more due to the standard instrument departure, so I will modify this to 725 miles. 725 and return. Note that it's now in yellow because it's modified. Then choose your desired cruise altitude and speed. This is a fairly long flight, so I'm going to click the highest button, and it's going to give us 31,000 feet. And I want to go at max continuous thrust, but we can easily evaluate the fuel burn and the time for the other various options that VisionProFlight presents us for cruise speed. If you want to adjust the outside air temperature for some reason, you can manually change the OAT. But generally speaking, I use the OAT provided by the National Weather Service with the predicted winds aloft. To get those winds aloft, click the winds aloft button. It picks the cruise altitude that you've already selected, and it asks for your departure time within 6, 12, or 24 hours. We're going to leave reasonably soon. So I'm clicking 6, and there's a nice map view of the average tailwind and the crosswind component. We'll hit save, and we can see that that goes into the winds aloft button. Then I go to the fuel page. This is where you can put in the important information for your ramp and taxi fuel burn, any extra adjustment for your alternate fuel if you selected an alternate, and your fuel reserve. I'm using 65 gallons for this. Once you've entered those, you can hit done, and it's a nice feature that all those entries you made in the fuel page are sticky, so you do not have to re-enter those each time. So we're going to go back to MCT. Then adjust your descent angle. I tend to descend as steeply as possible because it saves me fuel. Notice as I shallow out the descent angle, the total fuel number goes up because you're getting into the lower altitudes and having to carry more power to keep the desired indicated airspeed for your descent going. That's why I descend steeply. But if you know that you're flying in a congested area and ATC may get you down earlier, you can adjust your descent. Now, on the lower left, all the calculations are there. We see the estimated time en route, the time in cruise, the distance in cruise, the average ground speed, and the estimated maximum range. That number is calculated using the fuel that you have set in the weight and balance page and the winds aloft. Our planned distance is 725 miles. We can fly 1,063 nautical before we get down to our 65-gallon fuel reserve, so we have plenty of extra fuel for the flight. Now that we have the weather and fuel page configured, let's click on the weight and balance page. Here's where you set your payload numbers. VisionProFlight recalculates the weight and CG on the fly, and you can see the CG chart and fuel and payload change in real time. Now, to set passenger weights, click in the entry box next to the seat and fill in the weight. Now, on a Mac, you can use the keyboard to enter digits, but you still have to use the mouse to click the return icon, as the keyboard return or enter key won't work. I weigh 150 pounds with my flight bag. And enter. The right seater weighs 130 pounds, 130, and click enter. And we have both the console and both middle seats installed, but only one middle seat passenger on the right side. This passenger weighs 170 pounds. Hit return. There is 60 pounds of baggage in the aft baggage area, and the 20-pound flyaway kit is in the cargo extension. Now, if you have created passenger profiles, click on the little miniature person next to the seat, and you can choose whichever person in the profile is sitting in that seat. Perhaps one of the best VisionProFlight features in the weight and balance page is how easy it is to configure the seats. If you want to remove a seat, just click on it. There's a seat there with nothing in the area. Click again. It shows a suitcase indicating that you're going to have cargo there, but no seat. And then now you put the seat back in. For baggage, the bags button adds weight to the aft external compartment. VisionProFlight is smart enough to know that the 300-pound weight limit is, and it won't let you exceed it. Now, don't forget to use a slider to indicate the number of gallons of TKS fluid you have on board. If you are wondering why the TKS slider does not go to less than 1 gallon, recall the airplane flight manual limitations section requires a minimum of 1 gallon of TKS for all flights, whether you're flying into icing conditions or not. Now, about fuel. I have to say that the fuel slider takes a little bit of getting used to. The max and min buttons adjust the fuel load to the maximum allowable by payload or the minimum required by the data that you've entered for the flight. A tap on the arrow adds 1 gallon, and a long press and hold makes the fuel load scroll up rather quickly. It may take a bit of holding and tapping to get your desired fuel load entered correctly. Now, once all the weight and balance data has been entered, you can review the center of gravity and fuel breakdown. The graph is here. It very conveniently shows the maximum ramp weight, the maximum landing weight, and the maximum zero fuel weight. The breakdowns show your payload, your ramp fuel, the ramp total weight, your taxi fuel that came when we entered it on the fuel page, your burn to the primary airport, burn to the alternate, and your reserve, the required fuel, and how much available weight you still have to get to the performance limiting number. We're now ready to review the performance numbers for the flight. Click the performance button and you can see the departure airport on the left and the destination on the right. At the top of the window, you see the word alternate grayed out as we have not set an alternate for this flight. If we had selected one, you could toggle between primary and alternate and review the landing data for each one. Now you can edit the departure and destination weather on this page as well. Again, the airport button is green when using the METAR weather, blue when the MOS or model output statistics forecast is selected, and yellow when any manual adjustment has been made. Now this can be useful even in flight if you want to do a crosswind component check. You can enter the ATIS winds, click on the TM button to toggle between true and magnetic, and you'll have an up-to-date wind calculation, which is really good for doing crosswind calculations. Now, why do you even need to fool with true or magnetic settings? Okay, dig way back in your memory to private pilot ground school and recall that any, quote, written down weather, like a METAR or a TAF, displays the winds in true. Spoken winds, such as ATIS or tower broadcast winds, are in magnetic. Now, the data in the left column are fairly self-explanatory. If you don't recall what TORA, takeoff run available, means, you can click on the small question mark icon and read the explanation of what takeoff runway available means. The right column of the departure airport performance displays the various performance numbers. This is one of the many places where VisionProFlight shines. We can get this data out of the charts, but it would be time consuming and complex to accurately do all the interpolations. So let VisionProFlight do the number crunching. The ground roll is self-explanatory. Total is the distance required to reach 50 feet above ground level, and this is what Cirrus recommends as the minimum runway length for takeoff. It is not mandatory to have more runway than what you need to become airborne, but if you don't, well, you're an idiot, plain and simple. Remaining liftoff is how much runway remains from the liftoff point, and remaining total is the runway ahead of you when you reach the 50-foot AGL distance. Now, the remaining abort distance deserves some discussion. While Cirrus does not publish an accelerate stop distance table for the SF-50, many pilots wanted to know at least an approximation of how much runway is needed to accelerate to V1, then reject the takeoff. So Bob set to work and came up with an implementation for VisionProFlight. He calculates an estimated accelerate stop distance by summing the distance needed to accelerate to the normal rotation speed of 85 knots and then stop. To determine the stopping distance, he assumes data for a flaps 50% landing, since that's what we're using for takeoff. If takeoff is done at a weight greater than the maximum landing weight of 5,550 pounds, he extrapolates the data from the tables for a 4,500 and 5,550 pound landing distance. And also, to be realistic, he includes extra distance to account for normal pilot reaction time. And this reaction time delay is user adjustable. You can also adjust for wet runways or unpaved runways. While this abort calculation is not a certified and field-tested accelerate stop number, it is a good estimation that can only help you make an educated decision about aborting your takeoff on any given runway. The remaining abort number shown is how much runway will be ahead of you if you do abort. If that number approaches zero, then you may not have enough runway to accelerate to 85 knots and reject the takeoff without running off the end of the runway. Now, to the right of the airport identifiers are buttons for 5 operations. Map displays a graphic map of the takeoff with green for the ground roll, blue for the airborne distance to 50 feet HEL, and maroon for the abort distance. The Opt button allows you to choose data for unpaved runways, wet runways, and set the takeoff pilot abort reaction time. We'll close that window. The Start button makes it easier for math challenged pilots. We'll say OK to the notice on that. Makes it easier for math challenged pilots to figure out if they will exceed the crosswind or tailwind limits for an engine start. Grab the tail of the airplane and rotate it to where it's heading. And you can see that depending on the heading of the airplane and the wind, you will either be within starting wind limitations or exceeding them. A profile button shows the runway profile in detail. These numbers are taken from Google Earth, and the profile is the actual profile in 500-foot increments based on elevations taken from Google Earth. It can be useful when calculating gradient performance effects. Gradients are only used when it reduces the efficiency, never when it helps. The negative average gradient on takeoff is treated as a flat runway. A positive gradient will increase the takeoff distance. And the Next button cycles to all the different runways at the airport. And if you have more than a 10-knot tailwind component for takeoff, it's going to tell you that and tell you to please select a different runway. Let's finish up our review of VisionProFlight by examining the destination airport data. The data presented is similar to the departure airport data, except VPF calculates the correct VREF for your landing weight, flap setting, and if you've accumulated ice on the airplane. The Opt button here allows you to choose the landing flap setting and if you expect any ice accumulation on the airframe. Unpaved runway landing data is another option, as are data for wet or snowy runways. The Opt button turns yellow, as does the VREF number, if you choose any settings other than flaps 100% and no ice on a dry runway. VPF does allow the user to use FAR Part 135 factored landing data, but that is way beyond the scope of this review. Now, it's important to note that VisionProFlight displays VREF, not VAP or the approach speed. VREF is determined solely by the landing weight, flap configuration, and any ice contamination. VREF does not include any wind correction for gusts. And here is how the airplane flight manual defines VREF on page 1-11. VREF is the minimum final approach speed. It's the airspeed equal to the landing 50-foot point speed, 50-foot point speed with flaps 100% IPS off or with flaps 50% and landing gear extended. VAP, your approach speed, does take gusts into account. Section 4 of the AFM, page 4-20, says that for gusty winds, maintain the recommended approach speed plus half the gust factor. Generally speaking, we fly VREF plus 10 for most of the final approach, slowing to VREF below roughly 500 feet AGL. So when you see the numbers for VREF and VisionProFlight, do not confuse it with V approach. Okay, now that you've landed, you'll probably need some fuel. One minor annoyance to the SF-50 is the limitation on the maximum fuel imbalance between tanks when you're refueling. It's 75 gallons, and that means you cannot have more than 75 gallons more in one tank than the other. So if you have less than 150 gallons on board when you land and you want to add more than 150 gallons, you have to be careful when you tell the fueler how to fuel the plane. Of course, if the FBO fuel truck has two hoses, there's no need for doing potentially embarrassing public math. But if only one hose is available, you have to do the math to avoid overfilling one wing. VisionProFlight can do the math for you. Let's go back to the weight and balance page. Notice the refuel button at the upper left of the page. Click the refuel button. This is the first time we displayed that recently, so we get a warning. And you can enter the amount of fuel in each tank. Let's say that we have 58 gallons in the left tank and 60 gallons in the right tank. Hit enter, and it will tell you to refuel to 252 gallons, which is the fuel that we use for the leg we just finished. It tells you exactly how to add the fuel to the tanks. If you want to fuel to a different amount, change the fuel load on the weight and balance page before choosing refuel. If you don't have VisionProFlight on your iOS device or Mac, you really should head to the App Store and download a copy. Bob is happy to help anyone out if you need assistance. And best of all, VisionProFlight is totally free. I'm David Weeks, and thanks for watching this episode of Real World SF-50 Flying. Here's a recording of an interview I recently did with Bob. Bob, thanks for taking the time to do this interview for the SF-50 Real World Flying YouTube channel. Tell me how you came to write the VisionProFlight application.
I wrote the first app I wrote for the SR-22 again was just for weight and balance. It did not have any performance data in it at all. So it's slowly evolved over the years, and to the point where it is today.
So you run on just iOS devices and the Mac platform, correct? So you can run, for example, I have one of the newer MacBook Pros that runs a silicon chip. I can run on the Mac, and you can run on an iPhone and on an iPad as well.
That's a good point. It's got to be a silicone Mac laptop.
What airplanes do you support currently?
Yeah, so other than the SR-22, obviously the VisionJet, all the TBM models, a couple of Piper models, and a couple of Cessna 172 models.
Okay. One thing that I've always wondered is how do you get the underlying airplane flight manual data into the form that's used by VisionProFlight? What's the process?
Yeah, that's a good question. Back in the early days, the PDF, there were PDF files available, but they were pretty rough. You couldn't really copy paste from them. I tried a couple of character recognition applications, just to lay a sheet down on a scanner and have it scan in, and that was prone to error as well. So basically, it was me looking at it and typing in the numbers one at a time.
Time consuming.
Very prone to error. Yeah,
error prone.
Right. So what I would do at the end was I would have a second person, then I would read back the numbers and have that person, check those numbers for accuracy.
And now
today today the PDF files, they've evolved a lot. They're very easy to cut and paste from. So there's really no human intervention between from the cut to the paste into the app.
Very good. How long does it take the average user to plan a flight, the weight and balance, the fuel and the performance data using VisionProFlight compared to doing it all with the AFM paper charts?
Yeah, it takes me, with a little practice, it takes me about 5 minutes, but it takes a little practice to learn the interface. I honestly have never done one using the charts in the AFM. There's lot of interpolations if you're gonna check everything.
If you're going to do it the right way, you've got a lot of interpolation, a lot of page flipping. I find one of the best features of VisionProFlight is the ability to get accurate climb gradient information when you're doing a SID, a standard instrument departure, that would take a long time to do accurately in the paper charts.
Right.
A lot of your numbers come off the internet, but what if you don't have internet access for weather information, say?
Yeah, I mean, VisionProFlight will run just fine without internet access. I'll give you a quick story. I was at a VPO Converge a couple of years ago, and I was talking to a pilot, and he was flying, and he was maybe an hour out from his destination, and looking at the METAR on his GTC, and he could see that the wind had changed a lot since his departure, and he was picking up ice, so he had ice on the airframe. But he was able to use VisionProFlight to, through the performance page, to go in and manually change the weather.
Okay.
Add, with the ice option, he could add the ice to the airframe, and he was quickly able to determine that the runway that he was going to have to land on was going to be sufficient for his mission.
Good. My last burning question that everybody wants to know is, how much is a user going to have to pay for VisionProFlight?
Yeah, well, as long as I own it and as long as I'm developing it will be free.
It is free. Just to recap, there's no monthly access charge. There's no surcharge for extra features. It's 100% free out the door. That's great. Well, Bob, thanks for taking the time to chat with us about your background and history and features of VisionProFlight. I hope that all the viewers of the channel grab a copy if they haven't been using it already. And thanks for taking the time to chat with us today.
Thanks, David. And I might add one more thing. I'm always free to talk with anyone. You can contact me. The easiest way is through the app or through the VPO website just as well.
All right. Thanks again.
Yep.